Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another episode of Fixing It Forward. Yes, once again with Barbara's 1998 Chrysler Town & Country. In this episode, we're going to be addressing a couple of issues. If you watch the transmission series, there'll be links in the description to other videos involving this vehicle, so if you have an interest in that, check down in the description. But in a previous video when we were replacing the transmission, we noticed that the front brakes, well, the rotors were kind of, well, knackered would be a good word. And might as well replace the front brakes at the same time. We're going to do that. Something else I noticed while working on this vehicle is the parking brake on the right rear wheel, the cable is just laying there and disconnected. And lastly, there's a noise. Given that the van is making the noise while it's on the ground like this, I'm going to proceed with the diagnosis of the noise before we put it up in the air so that we have some idea of what we might be looking at. This is probably going to require two people, so I'm going to have Brian, cameraman Brian, move the van while I get under it and look around and see what I can see as far as the noise is concerned. Okay, Brian. Sounds like it's coming from over on this side. I think I found it. So what I noticed while Brian was moving the van is it looks like this little exhaust hanger was coming in contact with this leaf spring. Go ahead, Brian. And that looks like the source of our noise right there. Right, well, if we'd had this up in the air and checked for the noise, we never would have seen it. Because as you can see, now that the suspension has relaxed and come down, there's no contact at all. But you can see where it was. The witness mark, if you will, from that rusted area. My thought, and this is just the easiest thing I can think of, is I'm just going to come in here and cut the end of this off with my Sawzall. Just a little bit. I mean, it's just going to need like maybe a 1/4 inch or something like that, and it will still work as a hanger, but it won't come into contact with a leaf spring and make all that noise anymore. Now, my first thought was to use the Sawzall. I could just come up in here and just do the cut, and there I go. But the problem, battery's dead. So I tried to charge it up before I got started today. Obviously, that was not sufficient. So I'm going to go with plan B. Well, let's see if we won. We won. I love it when they're easy. Now that we've got that problem solved, I'm going to get the wheels off, get started on those brakes. The front brakes are kind of a known quantity for me since I know that it's pretty much just going to be replacing those discs and those pads. However, the rear brakes, in particular this right rear wheel, we have this cable, as I pointed out earlier, that's just sort of hanging here, and I don't know why that is. I just had a thought. Maybe I should just try and hit the parking brake to see if this cable can move. Maybe they disconnected it because this cable is frozen up. Maybe that's the issue, I'm not real sure. But it kind of looks like this is loose already. So before we do that, we can do this since this cable isn't connected anyway. See what we got behind door number 1. These look like very new shoes. So there's nothing back here that needs replacing. Maybe a little cleaning, a little adjusting, and like I said, trying to figure out the reason for this cable being disconnected. Now I've lowered it down a little bit so I can get access to the parking brake. When I open this door, I don't have enough room to get in here, so I'm going to have to go through this area. But I'm just going to activate the parking brake, see if the cable can work first. And if it can, well, we'll see about reconnecting it. All right, we know the cable on the other side moves, so I'm going to see if this brake locks up. It does, so we know the mechanism and everything is okay. And now it released, so we know that it can work. Now we just have to reconnect it so that it does work. Start with a bit of cleaning. This is going to create a little bit of dust. It's actually better to do this with the drum on and to minimize that. But I'm going to stand back, hold my breath, and try not to breathe in this dust. So I'm going through my brake tools and I cannot find my tool for releasing this spring, but I do have this pair of 90-degree pliers, which I believe will work just fine. When you're dealing with rear brakes, and I'll put links in the description to other videos I've done on rear brakes, this spring is your mortal enemy. Mess it up and it could seriously injure you. But this, I think is gonna work out just fine. Because really, the spring has nowhere to go. Sorry, I need my leverage. There we go. That worked really well. 90-degree pliers to do that. All right, the worst is over. The rest, much easier. In fact, I'm gonna go get a couple of other pair of pliers to undo some of these other springs. There's another long one underneath here, so I'm actually gonna employ the use of these side cutters to do. Try to sneak in here to get this one. Maybe I'll go the other way. Okay, it worked. All right, fine. You're not ready to give up yet. I understand. I just want your little spring. Yeah, there we are. I'm gonna make sure that I lay this out in the same way I took it off. Oh, and look, it's frozen. So it's kind of good we did this so we can unfreeze the adjuster. And this strut, well, I believe this is where it hooks actually. That's where it's supposed to connect. It's right there. But it's not moving at all. So now we know what we got to do. We got to make this move. I'm just going to remove the other shoe to check the movement of this side. That moves okay. Now that we know our cable works, we can put that back through. Go. All right, we got that far. To the workbench. It starts with penetrating oil. And then I suppose some beating. Get a pry bar or something that I can bring in here and work this back and forth. Ow. All right, looking at this, there's got to be some way for this to be held into place in order for it to pivot. I can clean it up, but the problem is if it doesn't stay there, then it's going to be an issue. This may be why it was disconnected. I'm just going to wire wheel it real quick. All right. That's progress, except for trying to figure out a way. That doesn't quite go all the way in there. I think I have an idea of how to hold this in. Here's the dilemma. This needs to stay in here and it needs to pivot. But what happens if you pull the parking brake and it pops out like that? Solution? And because that sticks up a little bit, I can tighten that down. So that washer will never hit, but it'll never pull through. It'll just be able to do its job. So I'm going to add a little bit of anti-seize on the pin itself so that hopefully it does not rust up in the future. I know I said a little bit. Not today. Not with a Chrysler, no. Not going anywhere. Before I go further, I'm going to clean the bosses on the backing plate and lubricate them so that when I get everything back into place, it all moves nice. You may remember that our quote-unquote self-adjuster was completely frozen up. I figure there's no better time to address that than now. Penetrating oil. Like butter. I mean, that's some nice penetrating oil, and I love my Nipix pliers. These things are awesome. That didn't take much at all. Some of you might be saying, hey Eric, why don't you coat that thing up with anti-seize? And I'll tell you why I'm not. I used to do that very thing. I used to coat these up with anti-seize and put them back together. And then after seeing what happens after they've been on there a while, all the brake dust and everything goes to that anti-seize and just creates a bunch of goo. Also, the anti-seize dries up, and when it does, it's just as bad as rust. So I've just gotten in the habit of a little bit of penetrating oil. Wow, that moves nice. A little bit of penetrating oil, get it moving nice, and leave it at that. Periodic maintenance and adjustment. In some cases, just using your parking brake does the adjustment, or sometimes backing up and hitting the brakes does the adjustment. Either way, you should use your parking brake on a regular basis, and it can help prevent things like this from happening. But this is done. Now we need to get this connected to this. Eric, how the heck are we going to do that? That spring is there. It kind of sucks. You're right. Underneath this spring is a cable. I'm going to grab the end with my vice grips. Actually, a bigger pair might be more appropriate. I'm going to come in with my, well, adjustable pliers, or side cutters. We'll call them side cutters. And we pull again, go forward, and that hopefully is just enough to give us what we need. I don't believe that's going anywhere. So now we'll lubricate those bosses. I am using anti-seize here. You're like, Eric, you just told us not to do that. Well, I said not to do it on the self-adjuster. On these, I always do it on these. This is what the shoes actually ride against. And as they do, this helps reduce the friction and also noise. Now let's see if I remember how it goes back together. I know you'll be paying attention. I've got videos on rear brakes. They're all fairly similar. Probably some struts that I should be putting in here. I remember right. There's this one that goes across the bottom. I'm going to say, it's hard to say which side goes which way, but this side's pointing up because I can see where the spring was. I'm just going to guess that it went in like this. There you are. Nice of you to show up. All right, now who went where? I think we went in like this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure of it. That looks right. Did I put that in backwards? Yeah, no, I put that in right. Pretty sure. Sometimes pretty sure is going to be good enough. That seems to make the most sense. I think we only have this one spring left. Winner! As you can see, our bolt here doesn't seem to interfere with anything. We'll have to check its operation. I'm going to check its operation without the drum on first, just to see if it moves. And if it does and it moves properly, then I'm going to put the drum on, adjust the brakes, we'll move on to the next one. I'm going to adjust these brakes. Now, they've already removed the access from the back here. I'm just going to show you what I'm doing so you have some idea, but I'm going to be coming in through this hole in the back here with this. It's called a brake spoon. You can also use a flathead screwdriver. I'm just going to sneak past this newly installed parking brake cable, at least try to, and see if I can get that to move. This might be a tough thing to do. Yeah, I'm going to go try a regular screwdriver for this. They didn't provide us any real access at all. I'm just going to blame Chrysler for this. Okay, here we go. So I can spin it in either direction while I'm back there. And that's what I'm going to be doing. So you won't be able to see this, but you can see what I'm doing now. And what this does is it changes the length of this rod, and it'll bring the shoes closer to the inside of the drum or pull them further in. And that's the adjustment. Which way is out? Yeah, and you can usually look at the direction. This is the adjuster here. So when you use the parking brake, this guy here comes down and pushes on this. So it comes up and pushes down each time. So that's why I say use your parking brake, because it'll keep the brakes adjusted for you. But since it goes in that direction, you know that that's the direction you go to lengthen the rod. Yeah, I know, that's what she said. I'll leave that there while I install the drum. I put a little bit of anti-seize on the flange too, to keep the drum from rusting to it. Help keep the drum from rusting to it, I should say. I said anti-seize is good to a point, but it does dry up. When I'm doing the adjustment, I want to get it as close to the inside of the drum as possible. The rear brake adjustment has everything to do with how your brake pedal feels. So the closer you can get it to what I call perfection, the better your brake pedal is going to feel when you step on it. And so right now I'm just doing the preliminary adjustment, trying to get it close. But I'm going to activate the parking brake a couple of times from up underneath, and that will help center the shoes, and then I'm going to do a couple more clicks and I'll be done. The idea is that when you're done doing the adjustment, that you have about a turn and a half of rotation by the time you're done doing your adjustment. If you go too far and it's actually coming into contact with the inside of the drum, brakes will heat up. As they heat up, they'll expand and the brakes will lock up. I've had it happen before, so you don't want to go too far. You got to go someplace in the middle. And these are the methods I use, and also covered in other videos, links in the description of how I go about this. It's pretty much universal across the line as far as drum brakes are concerned. To do this so that I don't have to get up in the car, I'm just going to pull on this cable. Oh, there goes my screwdriver, but pulling on this cable is just like pulling on the parking brake. So it's actually activating both sides at the same time, but it means I don't have to climb up in the car to do it. But this centers those shoes up, like I was saying. The other thing to be sure of is that the drum is completely flat on the flange, because if it's not and it's a little bit off, see how it's tight now, but do it like this and it's loose. I think we're just about there. And you'll notice, well, you probably did notice that the rubber plugs for the adjustments are missing on this. It's like the worst thing ever because it allows debris and everything to get in there. So if you do this adjustment, you have the rubber plugs, put the rubber plugs back to prevent corrosion of all these brake components on the inside. Kind of getting tired of doing it that way. It's much easier to do it the other way if the wheels are still on. But since the wheels are off and I'm right here, heck with it. I'm gonna be happy with that for now. We don't have to go through as much on this side, but since I went through so much on the other side, I'm actually going to remove the shoes and everything on this side so that I can get the backing plate smoothed out and lubricated like I did on that side. Looks like we need to go through a little more effort over here. I'm also going to make sure that the adjuster is working properly. I'm digging that penetrating oil. I talked about on the other side how this hook in here, I wasn't sure because one side, I'll have to pull this out to show you. One side has this hook like this, the other side does not. I'm gonna have to go over the other side and flip this over because I had a feeling that this was a stop for this parking brake lever assembly, and that's exactly what it is. So I just need to go over and flip that around. It's one nice thing about drum brakes is you can always check the other side to see where it's at. But why don't I show you how to quote unquote properly clean these, or clean these in a way that minimizes dust. So you've got the drum like this and it's only partially on. You can get in behind here like this and this can help you to minimize that dust that's so harmful. Now we have a little bit less dust to deal with. I meant to do that. This side has the rubber plug. Remember I told you to put these rubber plugs back if you have them? Look at how much better this side looks and how unrusted it is compared to the other side, which was missing its rubber plug. Not to mention that cable that wasn't in there, there was a big hole there also. So you still see the paint on the springs. Makes a big difference. I may have to back this off considerably. The spring's really tight like that. Just back the adjuster off. It'll put less tension on it, make it easier. And this side's not frozen up like the other side either. Still gonna use that awesome penetrating oil though. Now that's in there loose, I'm hoping the spring will come off there easier. It does. Well, this one has this weird little helper spring that was in there holding that on. Okay, this is what I was talking about. This adjuster fits up inside that slot, and I was wondering that on the other side, and I actually put it on like this without that slot. So I just need to go over there and flip that around to make sure that it's in there correctly. And this one just kind of almost fell right out. I have another setup like the other side. I don't think it's going to come apart, but I can't help but wonder that something there got rusted, rotted away. As long as we're here, clean those bosses. Ooh. This one. Yeah, I can still make it work. I just need to make sure it moves freely. I'm gonna wire wheel this a little bit. Hook faces outward. There we go. That feels perfect. It's going to spin nicely. They're not going to rub, not going to lock up, but yet going to have a nice firm brake pedal feel. I'm going to fix that adjuster on the other side. Now let's move on to these front brakes. When I get these rotors off, you'll see the back sides of this rotor and you can see how ugly it is. Mainly due, I believe, to a lack of service. That said, we have been hooked up by buybrakes.com. There'll be a link in the description. They have a lot of regular stock brakes, but also some performance stuff too. You might want to check them out. Once again, link in the description. These just have 2 10s holding them on, and I'm probably gonna have to take them both out, I think, because this style doesn't really lend itself well to flipping up like I do with a lot of calipers. So we'll just end up taking both of these 10s out. I like to start with the rears because they're a lot more challenging than fronts, at least in my opinion. So I just get the hard stuff out of the way first. I'm going to try my famous pushing the caliper back and opening the bleeder valve. I'm going to try it, see how that works out. Remember I said the back side of these rotors? Pretty ugly, huh? Okay, here's my bleeder. I got my handy vice grips at the ready. I do this to prevent damage to the master cylinder, but it's going to be difficult to break this bleeder valve loose with it just flopping around like that. So what I think I'll do is I'll first remove this outer pad. Just get that out of there. Yeah, there was plenty of pad material left there, but we're putting on new rotors. Might as well put on new pads too. I'm going to leave this pad on so that when I squeeze this piston back in, I don't have to squeeze directly on the piston. In this style, it's actually a lot easier to do it that way. I might be better off putting the rotor back on and prying against the rotor. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, I'll just put this back on here and hold it on and pry against it. Here's a handy trick when doing brake jobs. Old axle nut. Can just hold the rotor in place while you do other things. In this case, I'm just going to get the caliper bolt started so that it holds this assembly in place while I do my prying. Just going to rotate this. Well, no, I won't rotate that around. It's unrotatable. All right, I have my trusty fluid bottle. The bleeder valve is a 10 millimeter. I realize all this stuff is like on the back here and difficult to see, whatever, but I've done videos about, tons of videos about doing brakes. I'm sure there's one you can find that covers this exact same procedure. I'll even go so far as to say I'm going to put a link in the description for you. And that is not a 10 millimeter. I'm trying a 9, but I suspect it's a 3/8. Let's try the 3/8. Maybe some of that penetrating oil. Can't get enough of that with this van. Yeah. Makes me nervous. I don't even know if it's gonna happen. Oh, maybe. It either stripped or it turned. Not sure which. Stripped. Sigh. All right. We can't employ other means. If you can't bleed at the bleeder, bleed at the line. I say it all the time. People come to me, I stripped the bleeder off, I broke it, I can't bleed the brakes. I'm totally hosed. Eric, please help. Well, this is what you do. Works just as good. Now with this style, I want to make real sure that these are moving. I'm going to go one step further and fill the bores with a little bit of silicone paste. You're like, Eric, where do I get that there silicone paste? Well, link in the description. Everybody always asks me about this. They're like, Eric, I don't know where to get it. Can't find it. Will this other stuff work? I've been using this stuff forever. It works. I know it works. Haven't really used too much other stuff. I mean, not a whole lot of motivation if you've got something that already works. But this will ensure that the caliper moves properly. See these rusty spots? That's where the brake pad is coming into contact and the caliper is coming into contact. I'm going to go in here with this, clean those up, same as I did with the backing plate. Well, that way, that'll also ensure that everything moves nice and smooth. Also a little bit of anti-seize in each one of these places to ensure that the pads move. Before I put the rotor on, I'm going to clean the surface with some brake clean to remove any rust inhibitor that may be on it. This could gum up the pads, so this helps prevent that. And that holds the rotor in place, so it makes installing the brake pads and the caliper that much easier. Buybrakes.com hooked us up. They did. Or should I say, they hooked Barbara up. And here are our new pads. They are pausey quiet. Dun dun dun. We'll need one of each of these. Inner one clips in here. The outer one, sometimes they have, well, this one doesn't, but sometimes they have little slots they need to fit into when you put these spring type pads on there. But this one doesn't, it just slides in like that. Flip the caliper around. There we are. Make sure the brake pads have seated properly before you start tightening things down, because you can get these sort of off kilter and still be able to reattach the caliper. So make sure it's all good first. Now I'll reinstall my bolts. Clean where there was a bunch of brake fluid that came out of where the brake hose was with some brake clean. The only thing left to do now is install the wheel. We're going to do the same thing over on the other side. And now we install the wheels. This is a torque stick, by the way. It goes to 80 foot-pounds. You're not quite done. That caliper piston is still sitting pretty far away from the rotor. If you go to hit the brakes before we back it out, well, it'll keep going. I've seen it before. It's not pretty. So to prevent any issues there, pump the brake pedal a few times, and I wouldn't suggest taking it all the way to the floor. I would just go about halfway and just do that until the pedal firms up. When it does, those brake pads have extended out, made contact with the rotor, and you will now have braking Now, because we dumped all that brake fluid on the floor when we pushed the caliper pistons back, we're going to have to replace some of it now. So I'm just going to top off the master cylinder. Now that we have new front brake pads, we can top it off to the max line. Now we're done. Hey, that about wraps it up. We're practically done with this van. I think we are just about done with this van. We've addressed the issues with the rear brakes, the parking brake cable that wasn't connected, the suspension noise that was back there that we found, and we also replaced those front rotors that we found in the transmission video were pretty messed up. So we got all renewed front brakes and basically new brake fluid too, since we dumped out half the brake fluid when we replaced those front pads. This van is pretty much rebuilt. Barbara should be very pleased. Anyway, I hope this information was helpful to you. If you have automotive questions, I'd ask that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com. There's a welcome video there to tell you about how you can get help at EricTheCarGuy.com. If you wish to connect with me socially, I can be found on Google+, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I close each of my videos with be safe, have fun, stay dirty, and I will see you next time on the next episode of Fixing It Forward.